Welcome back to Out and About Today. I'm Pam Wheeler. We continue our conversation with Chris Sanders of the Tennessee Equality Project. Chris, you were talking about how you're working in this time. I want to talk about money. I can only imagine that there are challenges. I hope you surprise me because I don't know what you're going to say. But where are you in terms of fundraising 2020 versus where you were a year ago?
Well, sure, we're way down, and that's for two reasons. One is last year, of course, Taylor Swift came through with her major contribution, so we didn't anticipate a repeat of that this year. And of course, the pandemic is hitting people in their own incomes, and it reduces their ability to give. We also, though, have lower expenses this year because I'm not traveling as much. We have fewer fees for fewer things. And so that offsets some of that. But some people are continuing to give. Some people are giving more. And regardless of whether people are giving, I know that our members know that it's important to fight against the sleight of hate. And they worked very hard against the sleight of hate when the legislature was in session for its first two go-arounds this year. You know, the session was kind of broken up, and then they had a special session as well. So I am not concerned about the level of commitment of our members. What we hope is that they will recover financially as soon as possible for their own sake. And I think, you know, the giving will return as our members are able. So I'm not overly concerned. We've been able to adapt financially this year as well. I mean, we would always welcome more contributions, but we're realistic about what our members are going through.
Right. Well, that's good to hear. So you mentioned the session that was chopped up this year, and you've mentioned what it may look like next year in terms of meeting with our legislatures. What did we dodge last year? Did we get anything? Were we spared anything because of the pandemic? And what do you anticipate coming up 2021?
We were. The House passed a couple of bills that were really dangerous. They really went after transgender youth in the second half of their session. The Senate did not take up those bills because, one, they weren't as interested in them, and two, they were really focused on the pandemic. So, plus we have some allies in both parties in the Senate, whereas in the House we have very few allies in the majority party. So, yes, we did dodge some things, and those will be back. I assume they'll be refiled in the new legislative session in January. I would also anticipate some bizarre effort to get around the Supreme Court ruling on employment discrimination. Do I think ultimately they can succeed at that? No. That doesn't mean they won't make an attempt at it. And they're quite creative. I mean, they may find a way to classify more organizations and employees as religious employers and find a way to get exemptions. I don't know. But I know that some of the most devious minds in the state are working on things like that. So we will certainly see.
Right. I have to talk about the election. This show will air in September. At one of the airings, we may be just 40 days outside of the election. How are you framing this when you have conversations? Do you believe the presidential election is the biggest of our lifetime in terms of LGBT rights? What's at stakes, and what kind of conversations are you having?
Well, I do think it's quite severe given the turmoil that the country is in right now and the number of issues we're dealing with, from racial justice to climate that's not being dealt with, to our international relationships, which are being chucked out the window, to, on and on and on. I mean, every button you could push for chaos is on the board. That said, I wouldn't want people to forget to vote down ballot.
Mm-hmm.
one of the great things about a presidential election is it exposes people to all the other offices that are on the ballot. Because we all know that more people vote in a presidential election than in any other. We know this. Get to know something about those other races, the races at the state level. Because I can tell you, regardless of what happens in the federal election, the Tennessee General Assembly will continue to come for our community. So get to know what's going on in your race, particularly if you live outside Nashville. You know, in Nashville, almost everyone really, who represents us in the General Assembly votes pro-LGBTQ on those bills. But in Rutherford County, in Wilson County, Williamson, Sumner, all the surrounding counties, not necessarily the case. Okay, it's not the case, really. Get to know what's going on in those state legislative races and make good decisions.
Yes, and TEP is a resource for getting to know the candidates. And your point's not lost on me. We do need to make our way down the ballot and be familiar with the candidates out there. I want to ask you, though, I think that 4 years ago we were sitting here in the studio talking about the 2016 election. Just today, and we have a minute or less, how hopeful are you that Biden wins?
Well, this is me speaking personally, since we don't endorse in federal elections. I mean, I am hopeful. I think he's doing a lot of the right things. I think he's doing the right kind of outreach and messaging. But there are a lot of critics at the same time who are on the left who are not inspired by his candidacy. And what we all need to learn from that is, how can we get people inspired about the possibilities, about the people he might put in place as Secretary of Education, as Secretary of Housing, and on and on and on. That will make a huge difference in the life of so many people.
Yes. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us via Zoom. We are out of time, but I look forward to our next connection.
Thank you so much, Pam. I always enjoy it.
And stay with us out there. When we come back, our guests are going to talk about school in the virtual world. Stay with us.